Well, hello. Andrea, it's great to have you here.
Great to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me to the show.
Hey, not a problem at all. As you can see, Simon, Simon, as always, is in meeting hell, but I understand he might be able to break away and come here today. We will see. And Randall is apparently back to his old habits, sleeping in an airport terminal and eating airport pizza.
Oh dear.
So I don't know if he's going to be able to make it back or not. So
I
we shall
guess
see what happens there.
I guess we need some extra entertainment options between ourselves then.
Yeah, we'll just have to be very entertaining.
I can juggle
Um,
balls. If you tell me, I can bring some.
there, there you go. There you go. Um, well, I am Scott Stahl. I am the organizer of GDG Cleveland. One of the people who help run the Flutter community, have been involved in Flutter since September of 2017. I believe you might be one of the people who's been involved in Flutter even longer than I have.
No, I haven't.
No,
2018.
2018.
Yeah,
Oh, young one, young one.
I know.
No, so sorry about that. Please introduce yourself.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Yeah, so for the ones who don't know me, yeah, my name is Andrea. I come originally from Italy, but I've been living in London, UK for 13 years now. And for most of this time, I've been, yeah, just a software developer for a long time, mobile iOS developer doing freelancing for various companies in London. But I guess with the times changing, and after many years doing iOS, at some point I wanted to look for a new challenge, and just by chance I bumped into Flutter about 3 years ago. And so yeah, I started doing a client project with that as my first introduction to Flutter, which was, I guess, unusual because there wasn't really a lot of Flutter work out there at the time. But yeah, I just really liked the framework from day one, and so I was a little bit active on blogging at the time, and I thought, why not just focus all my blogging efforts into making Flutter tutorials? And that was also the year where I started my YouTube channel. So yeah, I guess I was just trying to share what I was learning at the time, and trying to think about what things would be good to share, what challenges I was facing, and what things other people could learn from. And that's kind of how we started. And at the beginning, I just had a simple Medium blog and my YouTube channel. And then later on, I added more things. I started running my own website, added a newsletter, started doing some paid courses as well. And recently I became a lot more active on Twitter as well, which seems to be the cool place to be these days. So yeah, that's kind of what I try to do across probably too many places, but here I am.
Oh, there we go. Nice. Well, I know I've really appreciated a number of your courses. You explain things very clearly. And you had mentioned a tweet, or you had made a tweet, I'm sorry, recently about how you spent, what was it, 9 hours or something doing a short video? Or is
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
I'm sorry, 5 hours doing a 9 minute
It
video?
was something like that. Yeah, I think one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that when you do video production, unless your format is just to hit record and just record and put it out there as it is. If you want to do something more polished than that, then there is a lot of work that goes into it. And I can see broadly there is definitely like two types of videos that circulate around on YouTube, particularly, and those are the types like videos that are very much scripted and done quite well with a lot of post processing, like effects, animations, all sorts of things. And it's up to you how high you want to take the bar there. And there's videos of people who maybe do it more like a hobby and just want to share things as they go along. So it's definitely, I guess, the scripted versus unscripted approach. But yeah, if you go for the scripted one and you want to do like a good job, you kind of had to think about, like you would write an article, you probably want to have an outline first, think about what you want to talk about, what the main content is, the intro, what takeaways are there at the end. And so you have to do all of that for the video. But then on top of it, you have to think about how you're gonna what's gonna be in the video, and like what bits
Mm-hmm.
you're going to highlight, and if you want to add extra fancy things on top, you can do that too. And the problem, I guess, with video as well is that as you record, you can make mistakes, you can mispronounce things, and if you are, then it also depends how much of a perfectionist you are. I guess at some point you have to call it good enough. But for me, for example, I'm not a native speaker, so I try to do a good job, but then sometimes I'm not happy, and so sometimes you have to re-record certain parts. So it really all adds up in the end, and so it's really not as unusual that I can spend a whole day just making a very short video. So that's the way it is. I thought at some point maybe I'm not doing it right, but it seems to be pretty common with other creators too.
No, you're doing it just fine, and don't worry about your English. Your English is great. One of the things, especially in the software world, that even native speakers have come to understand is everyone has different accents. There are like maybe 10 different accents in the US, and I can't understand some of the people in the South sometimes, the South of the US. So, and I can understand you just fine. So don't worry too much about the way it sounds, and your English itself is great. One of the things that I have noticed also, the same as you with making videos, is the mistakes. And the one that gets me, well, to give you a quick idea, what I'll do when I'm making a video, I'm using OBS Studio and I have a big red blank. So if I make a mistake, I hit the red blank, I wait about 20 seconds, and then I restart that section. So that way, when I'm in the editor, I just look for the red blanks and I know where to cut.
Yeah.
So, but one of the really annoying things, I know for me I have, but have you ever gotten all the way through your video, you're looking at it, you're doing the edit, and you realize you missed something in the code, something you wanted to go over, and you have to go all the way back, rewrite code.
Yeah. I try to be a bit careful with that because I know how time consuming it can be. So before I actually start recording, I want to have pretty much clear steps as a working project. And then I start from the end in a way. I go backwards all the way to the beginning, and then I start recording the video, adding all the bits back. And that way I know that what I put in is going to be fine. Also, what helps is that, at least for the free videos that I do, I tend to have like a written tutorial that goes with it as well. So actually, it kind of helps me to have the written tutorial with the code samples in it, which is kind of step one, and then do the video on top. By the time I finish with the written tutorial, then it's likely that there aren't really many mistakes. But when this is biting me a lot, even maybe less these days, but when I started making courses, it was a big problem, is that even if your code is correct, it's correct at that point in time. And 3 months down the line, APIs are going to change, everything's going to break. And so you can, I guess on YouTube, you can't really edit videos anyway. But if you're doing a course on a different platform, you can and you should, but it can be quite a painful experience. So yeah, depending on how bad it is, maybe I would try to add notes or additional pointers for people to be aware of what's changed. But yeah, I mean, things like node safety, for example, say you have 10 hours of video already recorded without node safety, you are dead. Like there's not much you can do about that. So the course becomes old, and that's just life, I suppose. So yeah, I guess
you didn't have to. Oh, I'm sorry, you didn't have to deal with Dart 1, did you? You weren't making videos that early, or did you have some with Dart 1?
I had a little bit at the beginning. So yeah, probably my first videos still had a bit of new keywords here and there, and some of those things. But I think that was really quite at the beginning of my journey, and then Dart 2 came out pretty soon afterwards. So I guess the bulk of my content was already on Dart 2, at least. That's
good. I just want to touch on something. There is a big conference going on today, tomorrow, and Friday. It is the Flutter World Conference. So if you can check that out at mygeekly.us/Flutter. And actually, I'm not so sure about the my on this one.
I can check it live for you.
Yeah, that could be interesting. Let me change that because I know Geekly works. There we go.
All right.
So geekly.us.flutter. And
I can definitely tell I'm a lot slower at typing when I'm talking, but yeah, it's redirected me to, yeah, you don't need you just geekly.is, .flutter.
okay.
Yeah.
And there's a request to get it in the channel. There we go.
This is a very interesting time of the year, actually, for conferences. Like, there seem to be quite a lot happening all over the world, even during the same days. So I'm sure that, I think there's one going on maybe next week, UK and Ireland. So there's definitely quite a few.
Oh, wow. Yep. And so that's the Flutter Global Conference. Yeah, there's a lot going on there. In fact, I know that App Circle and Flutter Community just gave away some tickets to that, and we may even have some more. But right now, we're really here to talk about all the courses you've been doing, so many of them over time. What is the newest one is animations, isn't it?
Yeah, the newest one is animation. It is actually my fourth course that I do now. And I guess over the years, it's an interesting thing that, I guess when I started Flutter, I was just doing it for fun, and I thought, why not try to teach people what I know and what I'm learning. And I also at some point realized that this is a really good time in a way to be a creator. The really the light bulb moment for me about teaching was that I read one of the Stack Overflow developer surveys 3-4 years ago, and one of the takeaways from that is that the vast majority of people who are currently in IT have 0 to 5 years of experience, and so being, I guess, a little bit older than that, I thought there is definitely a lot that can be done here to teach people and help people get up to speed a bit faster with coding. And so I thought, actually, maybe I can turn this into eventually a full-time kind of endeavor for me. And so I started kind of over the course of multiple years, actually winding down my consulting work and doing courses, which has been a very interesting experience in the sense that as a creator, there are definitely many more things for you to get your hands dirty with. It's not just coding. It's a lot. It's like when you start, it's just maybe the writing and making some videos, but soon enough, if you want to kind of make it, you have to start learning about marketing, SEO, newsletters, all those kind of things. And it's actually quite interesting. Like, there's definitely, in terms of what I do as a job, it's very varied. I never really get bored because there's always so many things to do. It's probably a bit too many for me even to take on as a single person, but it's very interesting. And so I like to be in this space right now, and I'm kind of happy to help people teach in various different avenues. You might be muted.
I did it. I did. I think I forgot to do it last time I was on camera, but I did it this time. So you actually prefer the creating courses and teaching to doing engineering consulting?
I think it's an interesting one because I at heart I'm a developer and I like coding. I like the problem solving side of things and all the challenges that go with it. But I guess at the same time there are similar challenges as a creator as well. Like, maybe the kind of problems that I have to solve are a bit different. Maybe it's more about how can I bring more value to the audience and at the same time make a living out of it myself. So there's definitely different challenges that keep my brain thinking, and a lot of it is interesting. I still do coding in the sense that maybe I don't take on big client projects these days, but one thing I noticed with client projects is that there is always a learning component there in terms of when you build some new features that you never tackled before, you're definitely learning stuff on the job there. But eventually, at the end of the day, you had to meet the objectives of the business and what they want to do. So your time slice of learning is limited compared to the amount of time you spend working for a client. And when you're a creator, you kind of had to focus on just creating the right thing that is intended for your audience. So you can spend a lot of the time just learning the things that you want to be teaching and not have to, basically you're not doing this for someone else, you're just kind of doing it for you and your audience.
So you need to just come join us and, do developer relations because that's pretty much.
It's interesting, actually. Yeah, I think since I started, I had a few proposals of people reaching out to see if I wanted like a developer relations role. I think what really makes it, I guess, tricky for me is that I'm kind of one of those people who also is a little bit of an entrepreneur, or I like to think of myself as such. So content creation is a way for me to see what can I bring to the table that I can monetize on as well, while still making people happy, while still making them learn things that they want to learn. And that's definitely a challenge, but it's a good time to be a content creator. And I guess, I mean, I've been doing it for 3 years now. There's still a lot of things that I'm doing wrong. Like, it wasn't until late last year that I started focusing on SEO, and I mean, there's so many things that you just don't know that you need until you realize or you read about it. And I guess a lot of it is about influence. Like, as a developer, maybe you start off with tutorials and documentation and trying to work out how languages and frameworks work. And if you don't have any guidance, it's going to take you longer to progress your skills. And as a creator, it's the same. And when you start as a developer, you don't even know who are the people that you should be following or learning from. And for me as a creator, it was the same when I started. I was just doing it. I was just writing blogs and trying to put videos out there. And it's only later on that I started thinking, how do these successful content creators do what they do? And do they have processes for what works for them, what doesn't? Because one of the downsides of being a creator is that sometimes you can put a lot of time and work into maybe just a single tutorial or a single article, maybe even up to 2 weeks if it's a long one, and you really want to kind of do it extensively and like explain things in depth, and maybe it just flops, like no attention, no kind of. So that can be not a nice feeling when it happens. And so you also have to figure out what it is that clicks with people, what it is that you had to do to help people so that people are going to like it. And it's not always obvious because you have to put yourself in their shoes. And even besides that, there's still a lot of things that are in part out of your control in terms of ranking sites.
One of the things that was pointed out to me, it's rather interesting, and we'll get off content creation and get into actually Flutter here in a moment, but it was pointed out to me that I needed to stop worrying about what's cool, and I needed to start thinking about what is someone going to be searching YouTube for or searching Google for at 2 o'clock on a Thursday. Because it's 2 o'clock on a Thursday or even 2 o'clock on a Friday. They want to get out of work. They need to find an answer about how to take care of this problem. They want to know how to do X. They don't necessarily want to see how I can use custom paint in order to do this really cool reveal. I mean, that's nice. It's flashy, but it doesn't help when they're trying to figure out how to do X. And so the idea was to make short pieces of content that are basically all about, how do I do this? How do I do this? How do I do this? And as creators, of course, it's nice to do the cool thing, but that's not always what people need.
I completely agree, like 100% with that viewpoint. And that's actually, I guess, if you look at some of my older content as well, that's kind of the approach I try to take. I think there are two main things that I think I want to get out there. And one of them is, how you do X. So if you're building an app that talks to a remote server and needs to access a database, for sure you're going to need some kind of authentication. And so you should know how to do authentication with Flutter and Firebase or whatever else service you're using. Those are the common problems, and those are kind of day-to-day kind of stuff. And then I guess in retrospect, after seeing a lot of the questions that come back from some of the courses, I realized that it's really important for people to learn the fundamentals. I cannot stress that enough. Like I think there are people that are maybe trying a bit too hard to make like certain apps or certain things that maybe are a bit too complex before they actually understand the foundations of like how do you use functions and classes in Dart. And that can be detrimental. Like you can't just go and build a full-blown e-commerce app before you know kind of the basics of how you build things. And so I try to spend quite a bit of time. That's why in a way I created a course all about Dart last year, which is going through all the different features of the Dart language that you're gonna need on an everyday basis. And I think people that either learn through that course or people that otherwise have invested the time to learn the Dart language with like the documentation and the code labs have an easier time, because once you're confident with the language, that's no longer a problem for you. You're trying to build a feature. You don't have to stop asking yourself, how do I do subclassing, or how do I add a mixing? You already know that stuff. And so there's a broad set of fundamental things that I think are important for people to know, and it's just a lot. In the long run, it's a lot better to kind of learn those well, and then once you have a good foundation, you can tackle bigger things.
Very cool. Very cool. One thing I'd like to point out, actually, we didn't really go over the code of conduct yet. So let's knock that out real quick. We have some do's and don'ts. Be decent, be respectful, treat people the way you would treat someone that you see on the street. Okay. Don't post anything that's adult content. Don't post rude things. Don't be advertising and promoting. The fastest way to get your question ignored is to keep putting it over and over and over again. We see it, but we have a lot of things that we're trying to get to as well. And harassment is not tolerated, of course. Be blocked from interacting on the chat, but what a lot of people sometimes don't understand is all of the people who run the different things in Flutter community talk to each other. I run the Flutter community Slack. Other people run the Discord. Other people monitor the Reddit, et cetera, et cetera. We all know each other. Okay, we go to these big Flutter events and we go out to dinner together. And if someone is harassing someone else here, believe me, I'm going to email them and your name is going to be known to everyone. So this is a very different world, and we kind of made it this way on purpose because it makes the whole community that much safer. If you harass people in one place, you're going to be gone from everywhere. So anyway, and one other thing too, when you're asking a question, if you want to ask something specific with code, you probably want to be doing that on Stack Overflow or in the Slacks. We're not going to be like setting up the IDE and setting up your problem and showing things like that right now. And also one tip, don't go on Slack or Stack Overflow and say, I need an example with this specific class, and could you name it this and create an interface with this? It becomes really obvious that you got a job on Fiverr and you just don't want to write the code yourself. So, or at least that's what people are thinking. So you really don't want to do that. Anyway, okay, so your new course on animations.
Yeah.
What are you covering here? Where can people find it?
Okay. Yeah, I can show you. So this is my website for the people that might have not seen.
Oh.
And thank you. So yeah, this is where I post really all my free content. So I have a good collection of like video tutorials and articles. Now, recently, I also even started to organize the best ones that I have and try to keep them updated. So I'm trying to build a good collection of useful tutorials. But yeah, I have a set of courses, and the latest one, which has this big red scary banner, is the animation. So maybe I should make it green. I don't know. maybe I need to A/B test this. But yeah, so if you click on this, basically it takes you to the page for my latest course. And this is really all about Flutter animations. And the way there, I guess the reason really why I wanted to do a course on animations is that all the little details and all the polish that go into making an app look nice and behave good and create a good user experience um, are things that really matter and make the difference. And if you're an app developer and you want your apps to stand out, then these days the bar is quite high. So it is true that with Flutter you can build UIs pretty quickly and get layouts in place. I think it's, at least in my opinion, the best framework these days in terms of how expressive it is, how well designed the widget APIs are, and how well the Dart works to kind of bring this all together. But yeah, animations is one of those topics which I feel like sometimes people are a bit intimidated with. And maybe that's because, I don't know, they might have tried to do animations in other frameworks or languages and they might have struggled with it. And a lot of the reasons why I wanted to do this is that actually in Flutter, animations are not super hard. There is a learning curve that is involved with that because depending on which kind of animation you want to implement, there are different APIs that you may want to use. And in fact, the Flutter documentation already does a pretty good job at covering animations in depth in terms of all the different APIs that they have. But like I said, yeah, there is a little bit of a learning curve. And so at some point, what I wanted to do was to challenge myself to build an app that was already on the App Store. And this is like a habit tracker that I use quite frequently. It's called Strix app. And actually, I might even be able to bring it up. So let's put it over here. Yeah, so it's like this little nice application which has a lot of like micro interactions, and you can use it in a way that is actually useful to the user. They are not just there because they're fun. They are actually useful, and they make the app kind of better in terms of user experience. And it's also very customizable. So you can do things like go and change themes like this. You have multiple variants for each color theme. And so all of this is also done with a lot of very custom UI. Like this slider that I have over here is not just a boring list view. It's actually, I mean, it is a list view actually under the hood, but all the UI elements inside it are a bit more custom. And there's a lot of things that go into this when I reveal and hide these icons. Like what appears here, like these little tooltips are actually staggered animations. So there are a lot of little effects that kind of bring this to play. And little bit of iOS junk there. You can flip the page one way or the other. And so there's a lot that goes into making this a really nice experience in just within one page. So I thought this is going to be quite an interesting challenge for me to see if I can do it in Flutter, and try to figure out from the existing set of animation APIs which ones need to be used in order to build this up. And so I decided to do this as a challenge for myself to build the app, and then I was happy where this was going, and I was also happy that I was actually learning quite a lot of stuff along the way, and some of the things that I had to implement to make this possible were not straightforward. I mean, most of it is built with the built-in Flutter APIs, so it doesn't really need any third-party packages. But sometimes it wasn't so obvious how to build certain features, and so I felt that there is a little bit of some things were a little bit difficult to build, and I thought this is actually a good project to teach on a course, because that's how you can learn how to build like a real world application and make good use of animations in a way that really benefits the user experience. And so once I had completed the app, I wanted to test a little bit the concept and the idea with my audience. So I sent out a small survey and asked people, if they were interested, if this was something that they would want to learn about, and the overwhelming response was good. And so yeah, I just put up a course sign up page before even starting recording any of the lectures or anything at all, and I had a good number of signups. So that gave me the confidence that this was a topic that people wanted to learn more about. And so then after that, I just try to think about what is the best way to take. So I guess on one side you have the Flutter documentation with all the different APIs, and it covers the various different topics that you may encounter with animations. So all the implicitly animated widgets, all the explicit animations, how to use animated controller, how to use animation controller, animated builder, and all those things. And the more I dug into it, the more details and finer details I started to appreciate about the APIs. So then I went back, improved my code to a point where I thought this is good to teach. And then I worked out kind of a good sequence of chapters, taking people from how do we start building the first effect that is like this task completion ring animation using custom painters and like explicit animations. And then later on, how to build more complex effects like 3D matrix transforms to rotate the page. How do you do animated theming in Flutter and all those kind of things. And so by the end of it, I had really a good bulk of work that I could kind of format into a course. And so over 3 or 4 months, I kind of just went in and kind of structured the course, recorded all the lessons, and kind of, well, opened it for early access and started getting people to sign up. And yeah, it's been good actually. I had a number of good responses from the course, and I have my own like Slack channel where I can monitor, what people are doing in terms of the progression with the course and like what questions they have. So I was able to tweak certain bits, and I've also included a number of like smaller challenges. So that, for example, when you get to the end of certain chapters, you learned, for example, about explicit animations by building one of the features in this app. And so at the end of the chapter, you might encounter a challenge that tells you, now that you know about these APIs, go ahead and build something else. And so I include like a little spec about what the student has to complete, and give them a hint about what APIs to use. And then it's a bit like little homework or assignment where they have to go and figure out how to put these things together to get the desired result. And so overall, I'm quite happy with the way it turned out, and the response has been really good. And just last week, literally, I finished recording the course. It was much more work than I expected, like it always is as a content creator, but I'm very happy with how it turned out. So yeah, I mean, one of the nice things as well about this app is because it has so little third-party dependencies, it runs on web just fine. So here I literally embedded it into the website. And so it's kind of nice that now I can do these little things with Flutter Web and just have interactive kind of demos inside my, pages and tutorials and things like that. So I'm kind of really trying to see interesting ways in which I can use Flutter and teach important topics, and yeah, just try to cover all these things. So yeah, I think maybe at the end of the show I can leave some links where you can get the course for a discount. I can share that later probably, but in case you're interested, I have it here as well. So I have like
oops, let me get out of the way here.
This was for the end, but since I'm talking about the course, tell me if it's all right. Basically, this is where people can go and get it if they're interested. And I also made a coupon today for people who are watching this session today so that they can get a discount. So I can maybe pop this up later at the end if you prefer, but that's just for people who are interested in the course.
We'll definitely also pop that up a bit later. An interesting thing, one of the points that we have been beating into the ground lately is I noticed you put the web, the app into your website.
Yeah.
So silly question, and I already know the answer to this. Did you build your whole website, including all the pages and everything in Flutter?
Well, I am sorry to disappoint, but no.
So you're
So
smart.
I'm smart in that sense. Yeah, I think this is one of those things where Flutter Web has definitely a lot of interest around it, and there are some people doing some amazing work around it. And by the way, if you haven't checked out Super Declarative, like Matt Carroll is doing some really really good work on Flutter Web, and more in particular about user input. And so a lot of the work that he's been doing recently is about how to create a really good text processing replacement for what Flutter has built in. And so he's built this amazing kind of document editor in Flutter that is kind of still in beta, but I think it has a lot of potential to really expand what Flutter can do on web and desktop and other platforms where mouse and keyboard import are more important than on mobile. But yeah, I think in terms of where Flutter Web is these days, I can definitely see progressing a lot, but it's still not the right technology if you want to write a blog, for a number of reasons.
And it's the kind of joke is that what people don't realize is that Flutter Web is producing a JavaScript app. It's producing an app. So
yeah.
And I don't understand. People somehow got it into their head that they want to try to use something that creates a JavaScript app to create the whole website. And we're all looking around at each other going, why? Why would you do this? Would you try to make a whole website out of one Vue.js app? No.
Yeah, I mean, I think these are also problems that have already been solved very well by other frameworks. So like if you're looking for a static site generator these days, you're spoiled for choice. Like you can use Gatsby, you can use Next.js. There's a lot of really, really good solutions there. And of course, all of them are based on the web, CSS, HTML, JavaScript ecosystem. And that's what browsers understand. But I guess the important thing to point out there is that, I mean, really, if you want to figure out performer, I was trying to find the lighthouse to actually in Chrome. But yeah, I think the thing that people maybe sometimes don't quite think about is that when you have a blog, it's a system that is made of many multiple pages, and you want each individual page to be as fast as possible. But also, Google will crawl your site and will try to figure out what the content of the site is. And if each page is independent, you can, like, this is like what your site really lives on. If you don't have kind of good ranking that you can achieve for each different page on the website, nobody's going to find your site. And so there are a lot of things that people take for granted in the web world, and especially with blogs, that are just not quite there yet with Flutter. And I know that there's efforts going on with SEO as well, but I think that's still quite a bit. No, we're still not there.
Right. And it's another approach that people have been saying is, instead of trying to kill ourselves to get there, maybe just focus on doing web apps with Flutter and still doing the rest of your web page and your website the same way you would with any other JavaScript app. And the thing is, really, Flutter makes it so easy to produce those apps. And you can also reuse a lot of the same code from your mobile apps. Now, there's an interesting quick question here, and actually, John, this is kind of showing a little bit of a misunderstanding. Server-side rendering, that's really something for Dart backend. People are using Dart on the backend on servers. Flutter is a UI toolkit. Flutter is not the language Dart. Flutter is the collection of classes that is the container, inherited widget, gradients, animated container, animated size, things like that. And so it's all about the UI. And that actually also ping pongs back to something else, which is people are thinking that Flutter should be able to do everything that an operating system like Android can do. And no, Flutter's a UI toolkit. It's not supposed to natively just reach out to the Bluetooth or to the IMU. Those are the jobs of the operating system. Flutter as a UI toolkit will go to the operating system and say, hey, I need the orientation information from the IMU. But it's not directly interfacing with the hardware. And in this case, Flutter actually is as I said, a UI toolkit, but people do things in the back end with Dart. So as far as server-side rendering, that you're going to need to talk to a Dart expert about. And there's a great guy who goes by Zoeki on Stack Overflow. All you have to do is look for the guy with 500,000 points. I wish I was kidding. I'm pretty sure he's about there right now. But yeah, so there is that one. And also 3D. 3D is interesting because technically 3D is not possible because Sky, the rendering engine, is a 2D engine. Now, that said, there are some people in this world that if you take impossible and wave it in front of them, well, that's kind of like waving a dog biscuit in front of them. And Simon's one of them.
I mean, I try to follow most of the right people on Twitter. I think right now you're probably talking about Thomas, but there's probably others that are
actually
a lot of.
This particular one is Simon.
Okay.
And of course, what Simon did, he basically reminded everyone, you can take any view from Android and drop it into Flutter. So he reached out and grabbed a view that did 3D rendering and dropped it in the middle of a Flutter app.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Let's see here. All right. So your other courses, and in fact, maybe not so much courses as a whole, but I know I had a lot of my questions answered through a number of your videos. Videos such as things on an old one I believe you did on REST API. You've done more recent ones on Provider, and I believe you also did some on RiverPod, yes?
Yeah. Yeah.
And those actually a lot of people are probably hitting. There's a good idea. There's a really good idea. What do you think of this? Make a course with clean architecture or MVP. So
yeah, yeah. I mean, the choice of courses for me it's I guess it's unbelievable how many. One thing that I find quite incredible is also how big Flutter has got in the last 3 years. And so at this point in time, when I had to make a new course, I really had to think hard about what is going to be the most valuable thing that I can teach, because I can't do everything. Flutter is growing way faster. Like there's a whole team of Googlers and other contributors like doing a lot of amazing work, and I'm just one guy. So I guess, yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a lot of very good topics that would make a very good course. And I do get quite a lot of requests as well from my students about things that they're interested in. One of the really recurring themes here is state management by a long shot. And the idea that I guess state management is almost like this ephemeral thing that you can't quite put your hand on it, because it's about how the application behave. And it's all easy in games when you say that the UI is a function of a state, which is the main principle, I guess, of how Flutter does things. But then in practice, how do you apply that to a lot of different use cases? There's a lot to get busy with. And yeah, clean architecture and all those things are very important, and something that I definitely want to focus a bit more on in the future. And I get a lot of feedback about, not even feedback, but I can see, because I have a lot of students, I get questions. Sometimes they post their code and they ask me, what's wrong with it or whatever, and I can guide them through some of the way they might do things differently. But if I actually look at the code as a whole in terms of what practices they are using to structure their code. Sometimes there is a lot to be said about how you structure an app properly, so that it's modular, so that the code is reusable, so that it's testable, and all of those things. And so with my limited abilities, I then can go back and try to, make tutorials and try to, sometimes you can't just give an answer in a couple of paragraphs and cover what you want to really explain or the point that you want to get across. So those are good candidates for me to go back and do tutorials and courses as well. In terms of courses, what I think I want to do going forward personally is to create like a complete Flutter curriculum that has already started with my Dart course, but then I want to do the next chapters of that, and that is, how do you go from building simple UIs to UIs that are maybe more complex, responsive, adaptive, different form factors, keyboard, mouse input, various things like that, scrollable UIs. Then do a big piece on state management, like covering the basic concepts, but then really looking into how you do state management for like bigger apps. And like a big part of these days, a hot topic is navigation as well. Maybe I'll wait until the waters settle down a little bit with navigation, because there seems to be a lot of things changing right now. But I want to cover that. I definitely want to cover testing, like maybe even have a standalone course on testing, and not just this is how you write your first unit tests. More like, here's an app. How do you make it testable? Or maybe do a TDD course. I don't know. Like there's a lot of ideas that I'm kind of playing with at the moment. But I think in terms of the people that come and learn with my tutorials, I want to have some sort of progression in my courses, so that people can come and start kind of this journey from beginning to end, and trying to cover all the things that are maybe not so obvious, because I guess unlike other frameworks, Flutter has very good documentation already, in my opinion, at least, and you can learn a huge amount from that. And on top of that, it's open source. Like these things we take for granted, but like you can go into any widget in the Flutter SDK and see how it's built. Like if you want to know how, for example, animated theming works in Flutter, you can just go and look at the source code for animated theme widget. You see interesting things about implicitly animated widget and twin visitors and all sorts of details. And you can spot patterns that you can then take and use in your own. You can spot clever bits of code sometimes that you can just take and use in your own projects as well. And this is something that we take for granted. And I come from iOS, which is a very closed ecosystem. You don't have access to the source code for Swift UI or UIKit, and there's lots of bugs that have been open for years with not much of a response from Apple. Documentation is patchy. They're trying to make it better now, but I think we have it really, really good with Flutter, with the amount of documentation and videos that the Flutter team also is creating, like top quality videos, widget of the week, Flutter in focus, decoding Flutter, all that stuff is really, really good. But I guess
I remember back around. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Just wrap it up. What I was saying is, as good as all of this is, of course, the Flutter team is going to focus on showing you what Flutter can do, what the APIs are, how you use them. They're probably not gonna show you how you build an e-commerce app or more complex projects. And there's a lot of practices. I mean, Flutter, in a way, like you said, is a UI toolkit. So it's maybe what's in the middle. But then when you go around and you look at mobile app development, it's a bigger sphere. And then to make a mobile app, of course, depending on what it does, you might have to talk to Bluetooth or networking services or local storage. And then if you go multi-platform, then it goes even bigger. Like you have to start thinking about different idioms for how you interact with keyboard, mouse, the system keyboard on mobile. So the Flutter team, and rightly so, focuses on the bits that are within Flutter itself and the boundaries of Flutter. But And I think that they already have enough on their plate.
Yeah, they don't have enough hours in the day to. A lot of the answers that we get about, hey, why don't we have this? Well, it's open source. You know, you're the expert on it. You've been thinking about this a lot. Go for it. You know, a couple other quick points. One of the things that I wanted to point out for a moment here is you mentioned testing and super declarative, and I happen to know that he is rather big on something called the Golden Toolkit from eBay.
Okay.
This right here, what it's doing is it's testing in a way that nothing else, I believe, is testing. And what that means is what it's doing is it's taking screenshots of every screen. And you go through your tests and you tell it how to navigate to where you want, and you tell it to take a screenshot. And then you set up another scenario and you have it navigate where you want and take a screenshot. And it makes this long strip of screenshots. And when you have something to refer to, you can hold that up and show it to your designer and look at the comparison. And also, if you have a strip of images that is exactly what you want, it will automatically compare them and tell you if it passes, meaning that you are just about pixel for pixel perfect, or if it fails because you're not. And this is really a very interesting piece. It's called the Golden Toolkit, and it's on pub.dev. So let me throw that here in a banner.
And yeah, totally. I think, golden image testing per se is not a new technique that came up with Flutter. I remember back in the day when I was doing iOS, we had some like UI testing capabilities to do similar things. So basically, like you would do with a widget test, you could interact with various parts of the app, press buttons, simulate tap gestures and things like that, and then take snapshots and then compare them with reference image that you generated previously. And I can only think this has got to be the way if you have an app that has got like 50 screens or more, like big, large enterprise apps, you got to have some level of coverage with that. And from the little bit I looked into it, golden image testing works really well with animations as well in Flutter, because everything works with tickers, and so you can decide, how much you progress with very fine level of control over the animation, and get the snapshot exactly where you expect it to be. So, by the way, this is stuff for me to research further on. I just kind of mentioning it, but
the next course, or at least the next video.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on with testing, and yeah, you got it. Right.
Very cool. We have a number of questions I just want to touch on. How do this is always a delicate subject, and we get a lot of very, very new beginners asking about GetX. And the thing is that when people start using it, about a month later, they move on to something else. And some of the very senior people who have looked at it said that it says that it's simple, but the problem is that it's actually simplistic, and you start running into problems very quickly of things that it cannot do. Really, what we recommend, the Flutter team recommends Provider still. The author of Provider has created a set of packages, Riverpod, Freezed, Hooks, and State Notifier, that are meant to be used as a set. And he believes that they are the next evolution beyond Provider. But again, the Flutter team right now, Provider is nice and stable. It's very well tested in the world, and a lot of people are using that. Flipping around to a couple of other things, there is no best state management. As Mr. Reality said in chat, sometimes you need Redux for a big enterprise type app. Sometimes you can use set state if your app is 4 or 5 pages. You don't need a whole lot. You just need to figure out what's going to work. If you are going to need to access your models outside of the widget tree a bunch, you're probably not going to want to reach for provider. You might want to go for RiverPod in that case. So, I mean, everything can be done. It's just which one's going to work best for you. And sometimes the answer can be different for different teams depending upon what those teams are already experienced with.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
yeah, it's sometimes because maybe RiverPod really well already, and maybe I'm well familiar with, I don't know, Block. So, and the time you would spend learning Block, you could have already written it in RiverPod and vice versa.
Yeah, I think in a way, all the state management packages, navigation these days as well, it's obviously it's an area where there's a lot of active research going on in terms of, even before Flutter, we had React and all these new kind of declarative reactive kind of frameworks. And along with those came state management solutions, and those are being refined over time. So I guess all the kind of, in a way, developers and maintainers that are thinking about these problems and kind of thinking about the larger picture, they are trying to come up with elegant solutions that will kind of apply well. But of course, every app is different. And so and at the same time, because there's so many options, like there's this thing called shiny object syndrome, where new state management package, I'm just gonna go and try. And actually, one more safe way to look at it is what is stable and tested and hasn't had a million API breaking changes over the last 2 years and is still suitable for what you need to do. And I felt that kind of very personally, in terms of I have courses that I need to maintain over a number of years, and I can see like when packages are just built and abandoned, and I can see which ones are kind of really looked after by the maintainers, and so there's a lot of things and considerations that go into there in terms of API stability as well. Documentation, like resources available. If a package is maintained by 20 people, it's more likely to have a longer shelf life than something just new that came out. So, but by now these days, there's probably at least 10 good different, if not 20 different solutions that might work quite well for most small or medium-sized apps. So, like you said quite rightly, sometimes the right solution is the one that your team already knows and they're comfortable with. And so at the end of the day, one of your main
You have
goals,
deadlines.
one of your main goals really as a developer is to kind of add value to the business. So build the right things for your audience is paramount and more important than kind of continuously switching between frameworks and things. And I had to resist the urge myself of kind of from trying to change things all the time. I kind of had to expose myself a bit more to the different things that are coming up. I want to see what's coming next and what might be good for the future. But I honestly, in my courses, I try to be a little bit conservative, if anything, with kind of the packages that I cover and like, yeah, the things that
you need to cover the ones that are most useful.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a question here about adding Google ML Kit and it increasing the export file size apparently quite a bit. For facial recognition, I don't know of anything else. I mean, that's really going to be a big machine learning AI type thing. Again, Flutter's the UI Toolkit. It's going to use whatever is out there as far as a package that can help make that happen. And yeah, as far as I know, ML Kit's going to be the only way to do that. Now, this question is not going to be short, I'm sure, but they're talking about RiverPod and also consumer widgets. And if you are going to either covering now or maybe in the future covering animations with a consumer widget or a consumer derived widget.
Yes. Good question. Well, It's probably not news for people that have seen some of my work that I actually do use Riverpod quite a bit in my projects. And so this is actually an interesting point in time for Riverpod as a package, because we have a developer 1.0 release, which kind of simplifies some of the APIs, makes them a little bit more consistent, and hopefully, again, I just talked 5 seconds ago about shiny object syndrome, but for the ones that do already like and use Riverpod, here's hope that with version 1 we get like a really nicely designed API that can probably stay as it is for a little while longer, and it's kind of stable enough to meet the requirements of most apps. But yeah, more to the question. Actually, my latest animations course already uses Riverpod developer version 1.0. And so I have a few examples in there of consumer widget and like, and in terms of how it relates to animations, I'm trying to think if I can give a comprehensive answer here in a short time, because animations is one of those topics where when you get started, for example, actually, let me even show you this one here. I got my iOS simulator. Like, for example, here, if you look at this little widget that I have, which is just a task completion thing, this is something that you need an explicit animation for. It has some local state in terms of it can be completed or non-completed. But the state of the widget itself can well be encapsulated within the widget. In this particular case, the state is also persisted to local storage. And so the next time you start up the app, it will bring back the task to the same state that it was before. But per se, animations like this, you can just do inside a stateful widget. Just use set state to update the state. And so there is not a lot of need for you to go into higher level state management solutions. However, sometimes things get quite interesting when, for example, you have, like, here I have this interaction where I can reveal or hide a certain panel by pressing on a button. And there's a lot of things going on. Like, this little interaction actually has effect over a number of different widgets. So this is a context where you have a single animation controller that drives a number of animations in separate widgets. So you are no longer talking about just a single widget, but you're talking about something that drives animations over potentially a widget subtree. And so state management becomes a concern here in terms of what is the best way of kind of making all this fit together. And so I guess maybe this is still a specific case. Probably, I'm not even sure if I'm going still in the right track, but like what I can say is one of the ways that you can solve problems like this, for example, the way I did it was to use kind of global keys. So you can, because a widget itself is responsible for rendering itself and changing its own UI state, then in that case, the widget can forward or reverse the animation by itself. But if someone else is the one that needs to tell it to animate itself, then it's a case where a parent widget needs to tell a child widget to perform an animation. So when you get into that kind of scenario, you had to make the parent widget be able to access the state of the child widget itself. And this may not seem like something that you have done before in Flutter, but it is actually very similar to the way forms work in Flutter. So when you have an input form with, say, email and password fields, and you want to submit and validate that form, what you do is you create a global key in your parent widget, you assign it to the form itself, and then you can say global key dot get state dot validate or save. So when you call validate or save, you're basically saying, I want to modify the state of the child widget, which is the form, and I do so by means of using a global key in the parent widget. And the very same pattern can be applied here. So you can use some button callback with a global key to access the state of a child widget and trigger animations. So rather than saving the form here, you are performing some animations, but the principle is the same. So this is actually, most of it is done just with built-in Flutter APIs and usage of keys. But then there are other cases where, coming back to the question, you want to use consumer widget and what can RiverPod do for you? And an example of this, in this case, would be the theming system. So in this case, I have a selector where, depending on where I click, I change the theme dynamically. And the theme is something that applies to the entire application. Every widget that you see on this app will have some inherited theme, and it can say something like theme of context dot I don't know, primary color and those kind of things. So the way that you can do this kind of thing is to say, when this list selector has a new selection event, then you want to keep track of the index in this list, which you can then use to do a lookup into a table that defines all the colors that you have available in the styles for your app. And so what you can do is to say, I'm going to change a piece of application state, global application state, which is the default primary color or the default theme of the app, from a set of possible values. And by changing the global application state, say if you were using RiverPod, you'd have like a parent provider that holds that piece of state information. And from that, you can derive the theme that you're going to pass to the material app. Or if you use RiverPod, it's the same thing. You're going to have like a RiverPod provider that keeps track of the selected theme index. And from that, you can derive the app theme and then apply that as an animated theme transition to the rest of the app. So yeah, I think maybe I'm realizing it's a bit difficult to explain this. If you want to see all the details, probably you want to take the course. But yeah, it's interacting. When it comes to global application state and animations, things do come together. A lot of the principles that you use are the same, like you would use for different kind of apps. But if you want specifically to see how to do global application state and animations, then probably right now my answer is, if this wasn't clear enough, take the course. Yeah.
Well, Mike did point something out, and Mike, we're going to have you on the show at some point here soon. RiverPod V1 is coming with a consumer stateful widget and consumer state.
Yes, it does.
So once again, Remy attacks another problem.
It's a nice one. It's really nice, actually, I think, the API, because a lot of times you'd have a stateful widget for whatever reason, and an example of this is if you have an explicit animation, you already have a stateful widget to start with. But if you also need to access some RiverPod providers, previously you'd had to wrap whatever was in your build method with a consumer, because there wasn't a way to access the widget reference directly in a stateful widget. And now all you do is just declare your widget to subclass from consumer stateful widget. You subclass your state from consumer state. And that means that anywhere inside the state subclass, you can get access to the context, which you already had from Flutter, but also to the widget reference. So there's a really good kind of, I like this concept of duality that RiverPod introduces, because in Flutter, you had the context that you can use to access ancestors in the widget tree. And in RiverPod, you had this concept of reference that you can use to access all the providers that you have already declared. There's a lot of symmetry between those APIs. And I think what RiverPod 1 does in that respect is really nice, because it gives you a way to create consumer stateful widgets that give you access to the reference. And once you have the reference, you can do anything you want with it with RiverPod.
All righty. Well, I'll tell you what. Looks like you've got a convert.
Cool.
And with that, we've been going for a little bit more than an hour here. Fortunately, we actually have jobs and
Wow.
do need to get some regular work going. Unfortunately, Simon and Randall were not able to make it today. but hopefully next week. And we are looking at, I believe we may have nailed down Ken Van Deen from Ubuntu, or actually Canonical, I'm sorry. And they are, again, recommending that Flutter be used for all desktop apps on Ubuntu. We will check and see how that's going. And that's next week on Humpday Q&A. But thank you very, very much for coming out. I really appreciate it, especially on short notice. You did not have a whole lot of time to prepare. And but hey, came out and helped make a great show.
Thank you. Yeah, it's good to, I guess, be able to help and answer any questions. Yeah, good to be here.
Really appreciate it. And with that, we will catch you next week.
Yeah.
Take care.
All right. Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thanks.